elderly black woman mocked by bank staff. But the Italian Mafia boss called her mother. You can explain why I just witnessed you treating this woman with such disrespect. The tall Italian man's voice cut through the bank like a blade, silencing every conversation, every shuffling foot, every clicking keyboard. The young blonde teller's face drained of color as she stammered, "Sir, This woman," he continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the suddenly silent bank, "saved my life when no one else would look twice at a dirty immigrant kid. She fed me when I was hungry, bandaged me when I was hurt, and taught me more about dignity in one afternoon than most learn in a lifetime." The bank manager, who moments before had been fawning over this powerful man, now looked like he might faint as the Italian's dark eyes burned with a controlled rage that promised consequences. "And you treated her like she was nothing. Have you ever wondered what happens when someone who's been dismissed their whole life suddenly has the most dangerous man in the city call them mother? This is that story. A tale about kindness that comes full circle in the most unexpected way." The morning had started like any other for Beatrice Washington. She woke at 5:30 a.m., the same time she'd risen for the past 50 years, her body remembering the schedule of a woman who'd spent decades cleaning other people's homes before the sun came up. At 73, arthritis had settled into her joints like unwelcome house guests, but she moved with the deliberate grace of someone who refused to be hurried by pain. Her small bungalow on Magnolia Street had seen better days. The yellow paint had faded to the color of old parchment, the wooden porch steps creaked warnings with each footfall, and the roof leaked in 3 places when it rained. But it was hers, paid for with decades of scrubbing floors, washing windows, and raising other people's children alongside her own. Beatrice checked her calendar, the large print one hanging beside the refrigerator. Today was pension day. The red circle around the date had been drawn weeks ago, a reminder of when she could finally pay the overdue electric bill and perhaps buy something other than beans and rice for dinner. She dressed carefully in her Sunday best, a lavender dress with pearl buttons, sensible shoes polished to a shine, and the hand-knitted shawl her mother had made before passing. Her appearance had always mattered to Beatrice. "Dignity doesn't cost a dime," she often said, "but losing it costs everything." The bus ride downtown took 45 minutes. Beatrice sat near the front, her worn leather purse clutched tightly in her lap. Inside was her ID, her account book, and a carefully written withdrawal slip requesting $400, enough to cover the electric bill, groceries for the week, and perhaps a small treat for her grandson's birthday. First Capital Bank stood like a monument to prosperity in a city that had left Beatrice's neighborhood behind decades ago. Marble columns flanked the entrance, and the floors gleamed with a polish that reflected the crystal chandeliers overhead. She always felt small when she entered, like an intruder in a world not meant for her. The line moved slowly. Beatrice shifted her weight from one aching foot to the other, watching as the young tellers chatted and laughed between customers. Finally it was her turn. "Next customer please," called a blonde woman with perfectly manicured nails and a name tag that read Ashley. Beatrice approached, her spine straight as a church pew, dignity wrapped around her like her mother's shawl. "Good morning," she said, sliding her withdrawal slip across the counter. "I need to withdraw $400, please." Ashley barely glanced up, her fingers tapping at her computer. Her perfectly penciled eyebrows arched as she exchanged a look with her colleague at the next window. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Washington, but you only have $217 in your account," she said, not bothering to lower her voice. "Perhaps you're confused about your balance?" Heat crept up Beatrice's neck. "That can't be right. My pension was deposited yesterday. Should be nearly $1,000 in there." The teller sighed, the kind of exaggerated exhale reserved for difficult customers. "Your pension shows as processed, but there was an automatic payment to Golden Sunset Care Facility for $780. Beatrice's heart sank. Her son Jerome had promised to cover that payment this month. His mother's contribution to his father's nursing home care. Another broken promise in a long line of disappointments. "Could I just have the $200 then?" she asked, hating how small her voice sounded. The teller turned to her colleague. "Mrs. Washington seems confused about her finances again," she stage whispered, as if Beatrice couldn't hear perfectly well. "Third time this month." The other woman nodded knowingly. "My grandmother got like that before we had to put her in a home." Shame burned through Beatrice like acid. She wasn't confused. She wasn't losing her mind. She was simply trying to navigate the broken promises of a son who couldn't stay sober long enough to remember his obligations. "I'm not confused," Beatrice said, straightening her shoulders. "Just give me what's in my account." The teller's smile was patronizing as she counted out the bills. "Maybe bring someone with you next time? A family member who can help you keep track." Beatrice took the money without responding, tucking it carefully into her worn leather purse. She turned away, blinking back tears of humiliation, when a commotion at the bank's entrance caught everyone's attention. The heavy glass doors swung open and the atmosphere in the bank shifted instantly. A man entered, tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that spoke of wealth without shouting it. His silver-streaked dark hair was cut close to his head, his olive complexion weathered by years but still handsome. Two younger men flanked him, their postures alert, eyes constantly scanning the room. The bank manager materialized instantly, hand extended. "Mr. Ricci, what an unexpected pleasure. Had I known you were coming, I would have prepared the private conference room." The man, Ricci, waved away the manager's fawning with a dismissive gesture. His eyes, dark and penetrating, swept the bank until they landed on Beatrice. For a moment she felt pinned by his gaze, like a butterfly to velvet. Then, to everyone's astonishment, his stern expression softened. He crossed the marble floor with purposeful strides, the crowd of customers parting before him like the Red Sea. "Mama B," he called, his deep voice carrying a hint of an accent. "Is that really you?" Beatrice squinted, confusion genuine now. The man before her was a stranger, yet he looked at her with such recognition, such warmth. "I'm sorry, young man," she said. "Do I know you?" He smiled, a transformation that erased years from his face. "It's Vincenzo. Little Vinny from Magnolia Street. You used to let me hide in your kitchen when my father came looking for me with his belt." Memory flickered like an old film reel. A skinny Italian boy with a split lip and defiant eyes, wolfing down her cornbread while she kept watch at the window. 40 years ago at least. "Vinny Ricci," she breathed. "Lord have mercy. Look at you now." Without warning, he embraced her, enveloping her in the scent of expensive cologne and something familiar beneath it. The same determined spirit she'd recognized in that hungry child. "What are you doing here in this place?" he asked, keeping one arm around her shoulders as he glanced contemptuously around the bank. Before she could answer, the teller who had served her called out, "Mr. Ricci, can we help you with anything today?" Her tone had transformed completely, eager, almost breathless. The manager hovered nearby, practically vibrating with anxiety. Vincenzo's expression hardened as he looked at the teller. "You can explain why I just witnessed you treating this woman with such disrespect." The color drained from the young woman's face. "Sir, this woman," he continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried throughout the now silent bank, "saved my life when no one else would look twice at a dirty immigrant kid. She fed me when I was hungry, bandaged me when I was hurt, and taught me more about dignity in one afternoon than most learn in a lifetime." He turned to Beatrice, his voice softening again. "Mama B, get your things. My car is outside. Whatever business you have here, we'll handle it properly." Stunned, Beatrice allowed herself to be guided toward the door, Vincenzo's arm protective around her shoulders. As they passed the manager, Vincenzo paused. "I'll be moving my accounts, all of them, by the end of the week. And I suggest you find new employment for that teller before I return." The manager's face went ashen. "Mr. Ricci, please, I assure you this is a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," Vincenzo cut him off, "is that you believe I'm negotiating. I'm not." Outside, a gleaming black Mercedes waited at the curb, a driver standing at attention beside it. Vincenzo helped Beatrice into the back seat with the gentleness one might show a precious artifact. "I can't believe it's really you, Vinny," Beatrice said once they were settled, the privacy partition raised between them and the driver. "Last time I saw you, you couldn't have been more than 17. Vincenzo smiled, the hardness in his eyes softening. 17 and heading to New York with nothing but a duffel bag and the $20 you pressed into my hand. You remember that?" "I remember everything, Mama B. Everything." The car pulled smoothly away from the curb and Beatrice watched through the tinted windows as the bank, and the humiliation she'd suffered there, receded from view. Her mind drifted back to the first time she'd met Vincenzo Ricci, back when he was just skinny Vinny from 3 blocks over. It had been a sweltering July afternoon in 1982. Beatrice was hanging laundry in her backyard when she heard the commotion, angry shouts in Italian, the sound of something breaking, and then the pounding of feet on pavement. She'd barely turned when a boy vaulted over her fence, his lips split and bleeding, his eye already swelling shut. "Please," he'd gasped, his accent thick with fear. "He's coming. My father. Please." Beatrice didn't hesitate. She'd seen Giuseppe Ricci's handiwork before, on his wife's downcast face, on the boy's thin arms. Without a word, she ushered the child through her back door and into her kitchen. "Under the table," she instructed, draping the tablecloth lower to conceal him. Not a sound. She'd barely returned to her laundry when Giuseppe Ricci appeared at her fence, his face flushed with rage and alcohol. "You see my boy?" he demanded, his thick fingers gripping the wooden slats. "Vincenzo. He run this way." Beatrice met his gaze steadily. "No, Mr. Ricci. Haven't seen him today." "You lying to me, old woman?" "I've got no reason to lie," she replied calmly. "And I've got work to do. Good day to you." She turned her back on him deliberately, continuing to hang her sheets as if he weren't there, as if her heart weren't pounding against her ribs. After a string of curses, he'd stalked away. Inside, she found the boy trembling beneath her table, his dark eyes wide with fear and something else. A fierce, burning intelligence that seemed at odds with his circumstances. "He gone?" the boy asked. "For now," Beatrice answered, wetting a cloth to clean his bloodied lip. "What did you do this time, child?" "Got an A on my math test," he said, wincing as she dabbed at his cut. "He say I cheating. Nobody in our family smart enough for A's." Beatrice's heart had broken a little at that. "Well, he's wrong about that. You sit right there. I'll fix you something to eat." That was the beginning. Over the next 5 years, Vincenzo became a regular visitor to Beatrice's kitchen. Sometimes he came running from his father's rage. Other times he came simply for the peace her home offered, for the cornbread she always seemed to have ready, for the books she encouraged him to read from her modest collection. "You're smart, Vinny," she'd tell him. "Too smart for this neighborhood. Too smart to end up like your daddy." "What difference does it make?" he'd asked once, his 15-year-old face already hardening with the cynicism of someone who'd seen too much. "Nobody gets out of here." "That's quitter talk," she'd scolded. "And you're no quitter, Vincenzo Ricci. I see something in you. Something special." Now, riding in his luxury car, Beatrice marveled at how right she'd been. The skinny boy with the split lip had become a man who commanded respect with just his presence. "Tell me what happened after you left," she said. "How did you go from that scared boy to—" She gestured at his tailored suit, the car, the driver. Vincenzo's smile turned wry. "The short version? I worked hard. Started as a dishwasher in a restaurant in Little Italy. The owner took a liking to me, saw I was good with numbers. Moved me up to helping with the books." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The restaurant had other business interests. I made myself useful. Proved my loyalty. Worked my way up." Beatrice wasn't naive. She'd lived long enough to read between the lines. "You're in the family business, then?" It wasn't a question, but Vincenzo nodded anyway. "I am the family now, Mama B." The implication hung in the air between them. Beatrice had watched enough news to know what that meant. The Ricci family was one of the most powerful crime syndicates on the East Coast. And Vincenzo wasn't just in it, he ran it. "Are you disappointed?" he asked, and for a moment she heard the echo of that 15-year-old boy seeking her approval. Beatrice considered her answer carefully. "I always knew you'd be somebody powerful, Vinny. I just hoped it would be a path that wouldn't put you in danger." "We don't always get to choose our paths," he said softly. "Sometimes they choose us." She reached across the seat and patted his hand. "The important thing is how we walk them. Are you a good man, Vinny? Despite everything?" His eyes met hers, unflinching. "I protect my own. I keep my word. I don't harm innocents. The rest is complicated." It was as honest an answer as she could expect, and more than most in his position would admit. "And what about you, Mama B?" he asked, changing the subject. "What happened to Jerome? Last I heard, he was heading to college on a basketball scholarship." The mention of her son brought a shadow across Beatrice's face. "Life happened. Knee injury his sophomore year. Lost his scholarship. Started drinking, then moved on to harder things. He's using. Vincenzo's voice sharpened. On and off for 20 years now. More on than off lately. She sighed, the weight of those years evident in the slump of her shoulders. He was supposed to pay his father's nursing home bill this month. That's why I was at the bank. My pension went to cover his missed payment. And where is Jerome now? I don't rightly know. He comes around when he needs money, disappears when he gets it. The admission hurt, but there was relief in finally saying it aloud. I love my son Vinny, but he's broken something in himself that I don't know how to fix. Vincenzo's jaw tightened. And his father? Your husband? Harold's got dementia. Been in Golden Sunset for 3 years now. Doesn't recognize me most days. She managed a small smile. But he's peaceful there. Better care than I could give him at home. The car slowed, turning onto Magnolia Street. Beatrice watched as they passed the familiar landmarks of her neighborhood. Miss Ellie's corner store, the Baptist church where she sang in the choir every Sunday, the playground where she'd once pushed Jerome on the swings. You still live in the same house, Vincenzo observed as they pulled up to the faded yellow bungalow. Never had reason to leave, she replied. It's paid for. It's home. Vincenzo studied the peeling paint, the sagging porch, the patched roof. His expression darkened. You deserve better than this, Mama B. It's enough for me, she said with quiet dignity. I've never needed much. But as the driver opened her door and she stepped out into the familiar surroundings of her neighborhood, Beatrice couldn't help but feel the stark contrast between the luxury she'd just experienced and the modest reality of her daily life. Vincenzo exited the car after her, ignoring the curious stares from neighbors who had stopped to gawk at the expensive vehicle and its imposing occupant. We have a lot to catch up on, he said, offering his arm to escort her up the uneven path to her door. And I think it's time I repaid some old debts. Vinny, you don't owe me anything, Beatrice protested as they reached her front porch. The third step creaked ominously under their weight, a sound she'd grown so accustomed to she barely noticed it anymore. We'll have to disagree on that point, Vincenzo replied, his eyes taking in every detail of her modest home. The faded curtains visible through the windows, the mismatched furniture arranged with care, the small collection of ceramic angels on the windowsill that she'd accumulated over decades. Inside, Beatrice moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had lived in the same space for half a century. She set her purse down on the small table by the door, slipped off her church shoes and gestured toward the kitchen. Can I fix you some tea? Or are you in a hurry to get back to your business? She hesitated on the last word, still processing the reality of who Vinny had become. Tea would be nice, he said, following her into the kitchen. His broad shoulders seemed to fill the small space, making it shrink around him. And I'm not in any hurry. Not today. As Beatrice filled the kettle, Vincenzo took a seat at her kitchen table. The same table where he'd hidden as a boy. His fingers traced the worn wood grain, memory etching lines around his eyes. You still make cornbread? He asked, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Every Sunday after church, she replied, setting 2 mugs on the counter. Some things don't change. And some things change too much. His gaze settled on a framed photograph on the wall. Beatrice, 20 years younger, standing proudly beside a handsome young man in a basketball uniform. Is that Jerome? She nodded. His senior year. MVP of the state championship. He had potential. He still does, Beatrice said firmly. Just needs to find his way back to it. Vincenzo didn't contradict her, but something in his expression suggested he had his doubts. The kettle whistled and Beatrice busied herself preparing the tea, grateful for the momentary distraction. When she set a steaming mug before him, he wrapped his hands around it. Large hands, she noticed, with calluses that spoke of work despite the expensive manicure, and a thin scar across the right knuckles that hadn't been there when he was a boy. Tell me about New York, she prompted, settling across from him. You said you started as a dishwasher? At Carmine's in Little Italy, he confirmed. 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. Slept on a cot in the storage room for the first year. That's a hard way to start. It was honest work, he said with a shrug. And I was good at it. Never broke a dish, never complained, never showed up late. That sounds like the Vinny I knew. His smile was tinged with something darker. The owner, Salvatore Bianchi, he noticed, started giving me more responsibilities. By 19 I was managing the books. By 21 I was handling other aspects of his business. The family business, Beatrice said quietly. Vincenzo nodded, not bothering to deny it. Sal had no sons, just a daughter. Lucia. A softness entered his voice at the name. We married when I was 25. By 30, when Sal retired, I took over everything. You have children? Beatrice asked, trying to picture Vinny as a father. A shadow crossed his face. A daughter. Sylvia. She's at Columbia now, studying law. Pride and something else, worry perhaps, colored his tone. Lucia passed 10 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry, Vinny. Beatrice reached across the table to touch his hand. Losing your wife so young, that's a heavy burden. We carry what we must, he said simply. Sophia is her mother's image. Smart, fierce, beautiful. Wants nothing to do with the family business. Can you blame her? No. He smiled ruefully. In fact, I encourage it. I want her to have choices I never did. Beatrice studied him over the rim of her mug. And yet you don't seem unhappy with the path you took. I'm good at what I do, he said without arrogance, just stating a fact. I've built something substantial. Protected my people. Made sure no one goes hungry or undefended. Like a king, Beatrice observed. More like a general, he corrected. Always at war, always watching for the next battle. Sounds exhausting. It can be. He set his mug down, his expression turning serious. But enough about me. I want to know what's happening with you, Mama B. The truth, not the polite version. Under his penetrating gaze, Beatrice found herself unable to maintain the cheerful facade she presented to the world. The words tumbled out. Her struggles to make ends meet on her pension, Harold's declining health and the crushing cost of his care, Jerome's disappearances and reappearances, always with his hand out and promises he never kept. Last month they threatened to evict me, she admitted, the shame of it burning her cheeks. I was 3 months behind on the property taxes. Had to sell my mother's silver to catch up. Vincenzo's expression darkened with each revelation. And Jerome? Where was he when all this was happening? He means well, she said defensively. He's just lost his way. He's a grown man taking advantage of his elderly mother, Vincenzo countered, his voice gentle but firm. That's not losing your way. That's choosing the wrong path entirely. Beatrice couldn't argue with that, though loyalty to her son made her want to. What would you have me do? Turn him away? He's my child, Vinny. And you're his mother, not his ATM. Vincenzo leaned forward, his eyes intent on hers. You took care of me when no one else would. Let me take care of you now. I can't accept charity, she protested. It's not charity. It's family. He reached across the table and took her weathered hands in his. You were more of a mother to me in those 5 years than anyone else in my life. You fed me, protected me, believed in me when no one else did. Tears welled in Beatrice's eyes. I just did what anyone would do. No, he said firmly. You did what no one else would do. And now I'm going to do the same for you. Before she could protest further, his phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression shifting to something more businesslike. My men are outside. I need to make some arrangements. Arrangements for what? For everything. He stood, straightening his suit jacket with an unconscious gesture. Tomorrow morning people will come. Good people who work for me. They'll fix what needs fixing here. Vinny, I can't let you. You can and you will, he cut her off gently. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, Mama B. Let me use some of it for something that matters. He moved toward the door, then paused. And Jerome? Where would I find him if I wanted to have a conversation? The way he said conversation sent a chill down Beatrice's spine. What are you planning to do? Help him find his way back, Vincenzo said, his tone neutral but his eyes hard. For your sake. Don't hurt him, Vinny. Promise me. His expression softened. I promise I won't hurt him. But he and I are going to have a very serious talk about his responsibilities. Beatrice knew she should protest more, should refuse his help, his money, his intervention with her son. But decades of struggle had worn her down, and the prospect of relief, even from such an unexpected source, was too tempting to reject. He usually stays at his friend Marcus's place when he's using, she said finally. The apartment complex on Willow Street. Number 14B. Vincenzo nodded once. Thank you for trusting me with that. He reached into his jacket and produced a card with only a phone number embossed in silver. Day or night, Mama B. Anything you need. As he turned to leave, Beatrice caught his hand. Vinny, she said softly. Whatever business you're in now, be careful. A shadow of something, regret, perhaps, or resignation, crossed his face. Too late for that, Mama. But I promise you this, I've never forgotten what you taught me about respect. About protecting those who can't protect themselves. He kissed her cheek and was gone, leaving behind only the lingering scent of his cologne and the silver card that seemed to shimmer in the afternoon light filtering through her kitchen window. Through the curtains, Beatrice watched as Vincenzo spoke to the men waiting beside his car. One nodded and immediately made a phone call. Another opened the car door for him. As the Mercedes pulled away from the curb, Beatrice had the distinct feeling that her quiet life was about to change dramatically. Beatrice slept fitfully that night, her dreams a jumbled mess of past and present. Young Vinny hiding under her table, adult Vincenzo commanding a room with just his presence, Jerome as a smiling child and then as the hollow-eyed man he'd become. She woke before dawn, her body stiff from arthritis but her mind alert with anticipation and worry. What exactly had Vincenzo meant by fixing what needs fixing? And what kind of conversation was he planning to have with Jerome? She had just finished her morning prayers and put the coffee on when the rumble of engines drew her to the front window. The street outside, usually quiet at this hour, was alive with activity. 3 trucks had pulled up and men in work clothes were already unloading equipment and materials. A sharp knock at her door made her jump. When she opened it, she found a tall, broad-shouldered man with salt and pepper hair and the bearing of someone used to giving orders. Mrs. Washington? He asked, his voice respectful. I'm Frank Russo, Mr. Ricci's head of operations. May I come in? Beatrice stepped aside, clutching her robe tighter around her. What's all this about, Mr. Russo? Frank entered, removing his hat. Mr. Ricci asked me to oversee the renovations personally. We've got crews ready to start on the roof, the porch, the plumbing and the electrical. I'll need you to approve the plans before we begin. He unrolled a set of blueprints on her coffee table. Beatrice stared at them in disbelief. These weren't minor repairs. This was a complete renovation of her home from foundation to roof. This is too much, she protested. I can't accept all this. Frank's expression remained professionally neutral. Mr. Ricci was very clear about his instructions, ma'am. He said to tell you that this isn't negotiable, and that you should consider it 40 years of overdue rent for all the meals you fed him. Before she could formulate a response, another knock came at the door. This time it was a woman in her 40s, dressed in scrubs with a medical bag in hand. Mrs. Washington? I'm Nurse Martinez. Mr. Ricci arranged for me to check on you twice a week and manage your diabetes care. Beatrice felt overwhelmed. I don't understand. How did he even know about my diabetes? Nurse Martinez smiled gently. Mr. Ricci is very thorough, ma'am. He had your medical records sent over last night. That should have alarmed her, the casual way Vincenzo had accessed her private information. But instead, Beatrice felt a strange sense of being cared for in a way she hadn't experienced since Harold's illness began. The morning passed in a blur of activity. Workers swarmed over her house like industrious ants, removing old shingles, reinforcing the porch, replacing ancient wiring. Nurse Martinez checked her blood sugar, adjusted her medication, and left behind a week's worth of perfectly portioned diabetic-friendly meals. By noon, Beatrice sat on a neighbor's porch across the street, watching the transformation of her home with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. Miss Ellie, who'd lived on Magnolia Street even longer than Beatrice, fanned herself beside her. Girl, who is this man turning your house upside down? She asked, her curiosity practically vibrating in the air between them. Whole neighborhood's talking. Beatrice considered how to explain Vincenzo. He's someone I helped a long time ago. A boy from the neighborhood who made good. Made good? Miss Ellie snorted. Honey, nobody who just made good rolls up with a fleet of Mercedes and 20 workers jumping at his command. That man's either a drug lord or runs with the mob. Beatrice couldn't deny it, so she said nothing, sipping the sweet tea Miss Ellie had provided. Not that I'm judging, Miss Ellie continued, patting Beatrice's hand. Lord knows this neighborhood could use someone looking out for it, whatever business they're in. As if summoned by their conversation, another black Mercedes appeared, gliding to a stop in front of Beatrice's house. Vincenzo emerged, now dressed in a light gray suit that somehow made him look even more imposing in the daylight. He surveyed the work for a moment before his eyes found Beatrice across the street. With a word to Frank, he crossed over to Miss Ellie's porch, climbing the steps with easy grace. "Mama B," he greeted her warmly. "I hope the noise isn't too disruptive." "Nothing about this is what I'd call subtle, Vinny," she replied, but there was no real reproach in her tone. He smiled, then turned to Miss Ellie, extending his hand. "Vincenzo Ricci. You must be Miss Ellie. Mama B used to send me to your store for penny candy when I behaved myself." Miss Ellie's eyes widened in recognition. "Little Vinny? Giuseppe's boy." She shook her head in wonder. "Well, I'll be. You grew up handsome, didn't you? And you haven't aged a day, Miss Ellie," he replied smoothly, making the old woman cackle with delight. "Charmer," she accused. "Just like your Uncle Antonio used to be." Vincenzo turned back to Beatrice, his expression growing more serious. "I need to speak with you privately, Mama B. About Jerome." Beatrice's heart stuttered. "You found him?" "I did." He offered no further details, but something in his eyes told her this wasn't a conversation for Miss Ellie's porch. "We can talk in my car," he suggested, offering his arm to help her up. Once they were settled in the privacy of the Mercedes, Vincenzo didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Jerome was exactly where you said he'd be," he began. "In bad shape. He owes money to some very dangerous people, local dealers who aren't known for their patience." Beatrice closed her eyes briefly. "How much?" 28,000. The figure staggered her. "Dear Lord." "It's been handled," Vincenzo said simply. "You paid his debt?" Beatrice stared at him in disbelief. "I did more than that. I've arranged for him to enter a private rehabilitation facility in Vermont. Exclusive, discreet, with an excellent success rate." He handed her a brochure for a place called Pinewood Recovery, which looked more like a luxury resort than a rehab center. "He agreed to this?" she asked skeptically. Vincenzo's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Let's say I was persuasive." Beatrice could imagine the kind of persuasion Vincenzo might employ, but she decided not to press for details. "When does he leave?" "He's already on his way. My men are driving him up today." He reached over and took her hand. "This is his chance, Mama B. A real chance to get clean in a place where he can't just walk out when it gets hard. The program lasts 90 days with aftercare and job placement." Tears welled in Beatrice's eyes. "I've been praying for something like this for years." "Sometimes prayers need a little help," Vincenzo said gently. "He'll be allowed to call you once a week, but no visitors for the first month. It's part of the process." Beatrice nodded, understanding the necessity even as her heart ached to see her son. "Thank you, Vinny. I don't know how I'll ever repay you for this." "You already did," he replied. 40 years ago when you saw something in me worth saving." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, until a commotion down the street caught their attention. A battered Cadillac with thumping music had pulled up, and 3 young men emerged, their postures aggressive, pants sagging, eyes scanning the street with predatory intent. "Trouble," Beatrice murmured. "That's Darius and his crew. They've been selling drugs on this corner for months. Police don't do anything about it." Vincenzo watched them through the tinted window, his expression hardening. "Not anymore, they're not." Before Beatrice could stop him, he was out of the car, signaling to his men. 2 of them immediately detached from the work crew and flanked him as he approached the young dealers. Beatrice couldn't hear what was said, but she could see the transformation in Vincenzo's body language. The casual confidence replaced by something coiled and dangerous. One of the young men stepped forward, hand moving toward his waistband, but froze when Vincenzo said something that made his face drain of color. The confrontation lasted less than 2 minutes. It ended with Darius and his friends getting back into their car and driving away, their music silenced, their earlier bravado evaporated. When Vincenzo returned to the car, his expression was once again composed as if nothing had happened. "They won't be back," he said simply. "What did you say to them?" Beatrice asked. I explained that this street is now under my protection, and outlined the consequences of ignoring that fact. His tone was matter-of-fact, but Beatrice could imagine the weight his words would carry. You can't stay here and guard the neighborhood, Vinny. I don't need to. He nodded toward a nondescript sedan parked at the end of the block. My men will maintain a presence until the message is clearly received. Beatrice felt a complex mix of emotions, gratitude for his protection, concern about the methods, and a strange pride in the man he'd become despite everything. Is this how you solve all your problems? She asked quietly. With threats and shows of force? Vincenzo considered her question seriously. Not all of them. But some problems don't respond to gentler methods. He looked at her directly. I learned long ago that power is the only language some people understand. My father taught me that lesson with his fists. The mention of Giuseppe Ricci brought back vivid memories of the frightened boy who'd hidden under her table. In that moment, Beatrice understood something fundamental about Vincenzo. He had taken the tools of his oppression and forged them into his protection for himself and those he cared about. Just promise me one thing, she said. No violence on my street. Not in my name. You have my word, he replied solemnly. Some problems can be solved with just the right conversation. 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of transformation. Beatrice's modest bungalow underwent a metamorphosis that left her neighbors gawking and the local real estate agents buzzing. The sagging porch became a gracious veranda with white columns and a porch swing. The leaking roof was replaced with architectural shingles guaranteed for 30 years. Inside, the ancient plumbing and wiring were completely redone. The kitchen modernized with appliances Beatrice was almost afraid to touch, and the bathroom renovated to accommodate her arthritis with grab bars and a walk-in shower. Through it all, Vincenzo's men maintained a respectful presence, always addressing her as Mrs. Washington, and seeking her approval before making any significant changes. Frank Russo, the operations manager, took particular care to explain everything they were doing, often sitting with her over coffee in the mornings to review the day's plans. Mr. Ricci was very specific about preserving the character of your home, he told her one day. He said it should still feel like the place where he found sanctuary, just safer and more comfortable. The neighborhood changed too. The corner where Darius and his crew had sold drugs remained conspicuously empty. The abandoned house 2 doors down, long a haven for squatters and addicts, was suddenly purchased and renovation begun. Miss Ellie's corner store received an anonymous donation that allowed her to repair her refrigeration units and expand her inventory. Most surprising to Beatrice were the weekly calls from Jerome. Her son's voice, once slurred and evasive, grew clearer with each conversation. He talked about his therapy sessions, the daily routine at Pinewood, the clarity that was slowly returning to his mind as the drugs left his system. They're teaching me carpentry, Mama, he told her during their third call. I'm good at it. Got steady hands when I'm clean. You always were good with your hands, she reminded him, tears of joy sliding down her cheeks. Just like your daddy. Mr. Ricci visited yesterday, Jerome added, his tone a mixture of respect and wariness. Said he's got a job waiting for me when I finish the program. With his construction company. Beatrice hadn't known about Vincenzo's visit, but she wasn't surprised. He had a way of managing details without drawing attention to his involvement. That's wonderful, baby, she said. A fresh start. He told me what he did to the house, Jerome continued. Said I should be ashamed it took a stranger to step up and take care of my mama. Beatrice frowned. He shouldn't have said that. No, Mama, he was right. Jerome's voice cracked slightly. I've been selfish. Thinking only about my next high, not about what you were going through. I'm sorry. Those words, genuine, heartfelt, were worth more to Beatrice than all the renovations combined. On a crisp Friday morning, exactly 1 month after Vincenzo had appeared in First Capital Bank, Beatrice dressed carefully in a new outfit, a tailored navy dress that Nurse Martinez had helped her select, and prepared to venture downtown. He had business at the bank. This time, a sleek town car waited at her curb, the driver holding the door open with a respectful nod. Mrs. Washington, Mr. Ricci sends his apologies that he couldn't accompany you himself. He's in meetings in New York today. The drive downtown felt different somehow. The same streets, the same buildings, but Beatrice sat straighter, her chin lifted, her hands steady in her lap. The weight of constant worry had lifted from her shoulders, replaced by a newfound security that allowed her dignity to shine unobscured. First Capital Bank looked exactly as it had a month ago. The same marble columns, the same crystal chandeliers, the same polished floors. But when Beatrice entered, the atmosphere shifted perceptibly. The security guard straightened, eyes widening in recognition. The tellers exchanged glances. And the manager, a different man than before, she noted, emerged from his office immediately. "Mrs. Washington," he greeted her, extending his hand. "I'm David Mitchell, the new branch manager. It's a pleasure to meet you. We've been expecting you." Beatrice allowed herself a small smile. "Have you now?" "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Ricci's office called to let us know you'd be coming. Please follow me. We can handle your business privately." He led her not to a teller window but to a comfortable office with leather chairs and offered her coffee, which she accepted with gracious poise. "I understand you wish to close your account with us," Mitchell said, his tone carefully neutral. "That's right," Beatrice confirmed. "I've moved my banking to First Community Credit Union." Mitchell nodded, clearly unsurprised. "Of course. I have the paperwork ready for your signature." He slid a folder across the desk. "And please allow me to personally apologize for any unpleasantness you experienced during your last visit." Beatrice looked up from the papers. "The young lady who helped me that day. Ashley. What happened to her?" Mitchell shifted uncomfortably. "She's no longer with the bank, Mrs. Washington." "Was she fired because of me? Because of Mr. Ricci?" "Bank policy prevents me from discussing personnel matters," he replied diplomatically. Beatrice set down her pen. "I'd like you to give her a second chance." Mitchell blinked in surprise. "I'm sorry. Everyone deserves a second chance, Mr. Mitchell. My son is getting his. That young woman should get hers too." She fixed him with a steady gaze. "She was rude and condescending, yes. But losing her job seems a harsh punishment for poor customer service." I'll certainly take your request under advisement, Mrs. Washington." "You do that," she said, signing the final form with a flourish. "And you can tell Mr. Ricci that was my decision, not yours." As she left the bank, head high and steps sure despite her arthritis, Beatrice felt a sense of completion. The circle that had begun with humiliation now ended with grace. Her grace, extended to someone who hadn't earned it but might learn from it. The driver was waiting to take her home, but Beatrice asked him to make a stop first, at Golden Sunset Care Facility. She hadn't visited Harold in nearly 2 weeks, caught up in the whirlwind of changes to her home and life. The facility director greeted her with unusual deference. "Mrs. Washington, we've been meaning to call you. There's been a change in your husband's care plan." For a moment, fear gripped her heart. "Is Harold all right?" "Oh yes, he's fine. Better than fine, actually. He's been moved to our premium care wing. Private room, additional therapy sessions, specialized nutrition plan." The director smiled. "It's all been arranged and paid for. Indefinitely." Beatrice didn't need to ask who had arranged it. "I'd like to see him, please." Harold was seated by a window in a sunny room 3 times the size of his previous shared accommodation. He didn't recognize her, he rarely did these days, but he seemed peaceful, even content as she sat beside him and held his hand, telling him about the changes in their home, about Jerome's progress, about the boy from Magnolia Street who had grown into a powerful man. "You would have liked him, Harold," she said softly. "Underneath everything he has a good heart. Like you always did." That evening, as Beatrice sat on her new porch swing watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, her phone rang. The caller ID showed only a New York area code. "Hello, Vinny," she answered. "How did you know it was me?" Vincenzo's voice carried a smile. "Who else would it be?" She chuckled. "Thank you for what you did for Harold. And for Jerome." "Family takes care of family," he replied simply. "How did it go at the bank?" "Exactly as you arranged, I imagine. Though I did make one request of my own." "The teller," Vincenzo said, unsurprised. "You asked them to give her another chance." "I did. That's why you're a better person than I am, Mama B. I would have made an example of her." "Sometimes mercy makes a stronger example than punishment," she replied. "You taught me that, you know." "I did." He sounded genuinely surprised. "That scared boy who came to my kitchen with a split lip and hungry eyes. He could have grown up full of hate and vengeance. Instead, he grew up remembering what kindness feels like. She paused. That's the real power, Vinny. Not making people fear you, but making them remember that someone once saw their worth when no one else did. The line was quiet for a long moment. When Vincenzo spoke again, his voice carried an emotion she'd rarely heard from him, vulnerability. I'm coming back next weekend, he said. Sophia wants to meet you. Says she needs to know the woman who taught her father whatever good he has in him. Beatrice smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. I'd like that very much. As they said their goodbyes, Beatrice rocked gently on the porch swing, watching as neighbors walked by, nodding respectfully in her direction. The street was quieter now, safer. Children played on lawns that had been too dangerous for games just a month ago. She thought about the skinny boy with defiant eyes who'd hidden under her table, and the powerful man he'd become. She thought about her own son finding his way back from the darkness. She thought about second chances and debts repaid and kindness that echoes across decades. Some might question the source of her newfound security, the methods behind the transformation of Magnolia Street. But Beatrice Washington had lived long enough to know that grace sometimes arrives in unexpected packages, and that even in the shadows, light finds a way to shine through. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that kindness never expires. The smallest act of compassion can change someone's entire life path. You just might not see the results for 40 years. Drop a comment telling me about a time someone believed in you when others didn't. And don't forget to subscribe to Serafina's Stories for more tales that'll make you laugh, cry, and believe in the power of human connection. Until next time, remember, we're all just walking each other home. Red Heart.